Right. We've got some people starting to join us. Great. We'll give it another minute, I think, Ramona. Hope everyone's having a great start to their Tuesday. It is Tuesday, isn't it?
Already.
Well, while we're waiting, I think I'll invite all the panelists to, all of the attendees to start talking about which bespoke products you use the most often in our chat. Righty, should we kick off, Ramona?
Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, well, welcome everyone. Today's topic is when and how to use off-the-shelf products, off-the-shelf and bespoke learning products. So as mentioned before, you're invited to share with us in the chat which type of learning products you use in your content strategy, whether it's off-the-shelf or custom-made. So custom-made or bespoke products, they're custom-made for you, normally by an external provider like eWorks, or your internal team. Off-the-shelf are generally generic products on a particular topic that you can also buy from an external provider. So if everyone can share in the chat, if you have any particular expectations in the webinar, please tell us about them now so that we can make sure we address anything that you're hoping to hear about. And I think I'll get into introductions. So I am the head of business development for eWorks and for VetAssess. And today Ramona is joining me. So Ramona, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. As Katie said, I'm Ramona Yin and I'm the manager here at eWorks, and I look after a lot of our bespoke or off-the-shelf content development solutions for our clients.
Thanks, Ramona. So we've allowed 40 minutes for this session today, but it may not go that long. We've tried to allow some time to address particular questions that people may have about their own projects. If anyone's wanting to share anything with us. So I'd like to begin this session by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today, which for us is Cremorne, for us in Cremorne is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and their cultural heritage. I recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. So off-the-shelf learning products are quite similar to the books we borrow from the library. They haven't been written for us specifically, but they add significant value to our learning. For off-the-shelf products, you don't have to wait on design, course development or testing for your learning products. It is pre-designed and can be uploaded online to your course library or your LMS immediately. So ideally, when you're buying something that's off the shelf, you know that the course has been backed by industry experts who do understand the topic. So for example, leadership or mental health, they've generally been, they would have been developed by subject matter experts. So Ramona, do you want to talk to us about what bespoke learning products are?
Sure. So just using the same comparison, if you look at, off the shelf being similar to a book. Bespoke would be similar to a letter somebody writes us. It's very specific to what they want to say or want us to know in that letter. It looks at really personalizing that to our needs. So if it was a bespoke product for your organization, it's looking at your learners as the person that you're conveying that message to or that you're trying to get that learning through to. It requires a little bit of time, obviously, because you need to do that analytical piece about understanding first of all, who you're writing to and what they might need to understand that message, and then how you're going to develop that message specifically for them. And then you're looking at your own industry experts or your networks or communities to ensure that you've got that subject matter expertise when you're conveying that message, whether it be in the type of language or the complexity of that content, or whether it be just language for that particular industry or your organization.
Thanks, Ramona. That was a great example. Okay, so we can talk about the importance of a content strategy. I think that that's a really good place to start. So for a content strategy, there isn't a battle between off the shelf and bespoke. That's why we've called out there off the shelf and bespoke. So the two types of products can collaborate to bring you the learning outcomes that you're aiming for with minimum resources required. So if you can achieve the learning outcomes with an off-the-shelf product, then obviously go for it. But use bespoke, especially when you're wanting to contextualize or customize something or achieve a particular learning outcome. So we thought we'd do an activity. So in this activity, let's choose between off-the-shelf and bespoke learning products for each of these situations. So if we can get people to please in the chat, let us know for each scenario what they would choose, whether it would be off the shelf or bespoke or both. That would be great. And Ramona, maybe you can help talk through each of the scenarios.
So I'll just give people some time to write their responses. And while you're doing that, probably the easiest way to do that is if you just write 1, 2, 3, 4, and then next to them, if they're off the shelf and bespoke, you don't need to write the blurb that's already on the slide. So just while you're working through that, I'll just explain what each of them is kind of requesting. So the first one is, your organization might need a generic WHS course for your office employees. So it might be something around how to lift safely. It might be about anti-bullying. It's just a generic course that, every organization will at some point in time have to do. And you're looking for content for that. So considering whether you want off the shelf or bespoke, which one would be more suitable? The second one looks at, if you were offering a unit of competency from a specific qualification, and in this case, we've used the Certificate 3 in business as an example, and there's a specific unit you're looking for. Would you want off the shelf, or would you rather somebody write a bespoke product for you or for your organization? The second one is very similar to the third one is very similar to the second one, except in this case, there is a unit in construction which kind of goes across most facets of construction, including bricklaying. But in saying that, it most likely will be that unit will be very generic and just speak to construction, where you're teaching it as part of bricklaying. And looking at that unit, it is a lower level unit. So it might be looking at it in a Certificate 2 and a Certificate 3 in plumbing. So early students, would you want that bespoke or off the shelf? And then the last one is very specific to your particular organization. There's a micro-learning, a specific skill that you need to get across. You might be upgrading systems. You might need to process particular things in a specific way or a new way. Legislation might have changed, which might change operations. It's a quick, sharp, specific module for your particular workforce. So just again, putting down whether you would be looking at off the shelf or bespoke for each one of those. So we've got some answers coming through. Naomi's put hers up. If there's others that want to have a try, Ujamai, I hope I've said that correctly, has put theirs up as well, which is good. Very similar, or actually very similar, except for number 2, there's could be a combination of both.
I think it's easy to say there's no right or wrong though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So as people are writing these, have a think about what you were going to write compared to what I'm about to say. And as I said, there is no right or wrong answer, but if you've been in the product space for a while, there is a tendency to lean in one way or the other, and I'll explain why you may lean towards one product as opposed to the other. So the first one is off the shelf, and I do want to preface every response here by saying that you have assuming that you have a provider that is a credible provider that has relevant subject matter expertise and understands the compliance behind each of these modules, and you've approached that particular provider for these products. In that instance, the first one, as most people have said, would be off the shelf, because it is quite specific in terms of the compliance requirements, maybe some legislation. It's not going to be much different from organisation to organisation. WHS is WHS. In the best case scenario, you may want to customize it to your specific example using your specific resources, your equipment, your workplace. But in general, the content will be very much similar and easy enough for the learner to get their head around. So, and it's usually something that we need pretty quickly, especially if we're running an organisation that has constant onboarding, that you want that module to be quickly updated and readily available. So the first one, as most people have suggested, would be off the shelf. The second one, most people have said off the shelf, but slightly contextualized, which again, if we had the option, definitely we would buy an off the shelf and uplift it. But if we had to purely choose one or the other, we would go, as most people have said, off the shelf, only because the unit of competence is quite specific. And for people that are in the vocational education and training space would know, it's quite prescriptive in terms of what you need to cover, both in content and assessment. So if you were to buy this off the shelf, it would be easy enough to kind of support it with your own examples in the classroom or workshops, or even put your own resources up to kind of contextualize it to the environment that you want it to be in. But the content and assessment should, for the most part, if it's a compliant product, be what you need. The second one is very similar to the first one, except it would require some contextualization, especially if we're considering it is for people that are just entering or new to bricklaying. That when we talk about construction, we're very specific what those requirements are, some of the things that they might be up against in that industry. And because it's a safety unit, you'd want to make sure that the student is really being assessed against what they would be doing in the workplace, because obviously they're going to otherwise be a risk to themselves and other people. So in that case, if you had to choose one, you may want to go bespoke, because you need to be really sure that the student is competent in that unit, because it is a safety unit and bricklaying could be quite dangerous depending on what you're building. And the last one is, as most people have said, is bespoke. It's very specific to a skill that you might need, regardless of how generic that skill might be. If you're onboarding new employees, for better retention, for better engagement, to move your workforce from cultural fit to cultural add, you really need to speak to them and make sure that they understand where they sit in the organisation. Micro learnings are usually quick and sharp, and you want something to be learned very specific in the way that you do it. So, as most people have said, that's correct. We would be looking at a bespoke product for when we're doing things that are very specific to our own workplace.
Thanks, Rowena. I think the other thing to call out is just like any learning outcome that refers to like processes, procedures, or policies to any organisation. It's best to build it in a bespoke way.
That's right. So just on the back of that, some of the, I suppose, benefits to having bespoke is looking at what are the benefits, not just but to the organisation, but to the learner. So with a bespoke product, it's designed specifically for that particular learner. So in here, we say designed to fit you. So we say you, your organisation, and your learning pool, whether it's just members, your staff, or your students. When it's bespoke, it actually speaks to the context, it speaks to the complexity of the skills that the learner need to achieve, but also to the level that they're at. And there's a conscious decision on how to scaffold the difference between where the learner is and where you want to get to. It's designed to look and feel like the organisation or the institute or the industry that you want to reflect. So, it considers branding, it considers the types of colours and images, whether we use photographs or animations. And then it's easier to update because you own it. Usually bespoke products, you own the IP. So if you wanted to change anything, it's really up to you to make that decision. Whereas obviously if it's off the shelf, you need to make sure that you've got the right licensing requirements in place. I suppose downside of Bespoke is because there is a higher level of engagement with you to analyze the pieces, to analyze the processes, to analyze the actual way that we're going to convey that content or that message, and even think about what kind of tools we might be using, what type of activities, if it's on an LMS, are we going to use any other things and plugins that are outside of the existing LMS? There is a higher initial cost. But usually what you will find on the other side of that is that you'll have a higher engagement rate. And so in terms of, especially if you're developing staff, you've got higher retention rates and higher, effective efficiency in the workplace. But again, on the other side of that, it's not something that you can think about today and have tomorrow. It usually takes, because of that analysis piece, it takes a little bit longer to develop. And if it's purely customized, where you're looking at images and photographs or videos in your workplace, then obviously that takes time to actually produce as well.
Thanks, Ramona. I think also if the bespoke training is actually created in-house, while it can be challenging, there's also opportunities to develop it with your staff and get them involved because of their roles and responsibilities, and really tailoring that to what you need.
Yep.
Great. And do you want to talk through off-the-shelf products as well?
So just as Bespoke have their own place and their own benefits, there is benefits to having off-the-shelf product. As we spoke, if it's a compliance product and you're not an expert in that compliance space, it's better off to go to someone that's going to give you that off-the-shelf product that has done it over and over again. It's lower usually in cost because they use a different cost modeling process, because they basically sell it on bulk. It saves you time because it is off the shelf, it's already made. There's usually very little that you can change with it. Sometimes you might be able to put a banner of your organization across it or change the colors, but there's not much more you can change with it. And it is low risk because you can look at reviews and see how others have used it, because there'll be multiple other people using it. Because other people are using it, the downside of that is you may not have the competitive advantage to a particular course or a particular program if you are going to market and competing with other providers in that space, because the chances are that your product is very much similar to somebody else's product, especially if they've already experienced that product, whether it's in that course or another course elsewhere, and they haven't liked it, and they realize that you're using the same product, it may reflect badly. And it doesn't really speak very specifically to your particular industry or your learner, because as I said, it's made for a larger market. So they try to capture as much of that market as possible and make sure that it's relevant for everybody. And you may not have everybody in that particular classroom or a workshop. And also the other difficulty with that is that you don't own the copyright in most cases to that. So if there's any changes you want to make, you actually have to go back to the provider and they make the changes. Or if you are able to make those changes, then there's that risk of making sure that any changes that you make are going to be compliant, whether it's in the context of VET or whether the context of WHS or whatever it might be, that there is now an added cost to that for that uplift and making it suitable for you. So
that's great. Thanks, Ramona. So some hidden costs. This is, you know quite a lot about hidden costs, Ramona, unfortunately. Got some examples I'm sure you could share with us.
Yeah, so with off the shelf, if you buy it just as is, you've got what you've paid for, I guess, but then there's that cost in actually finding the right provider, making sure it's compliant. Now, there is no way of doing that or knowing that without doing your own validation of that particular product or your own review of that particular product. Someone has to do that. Someone has to put that time into doing it, whether it's one of your staff members, whether it's a teacher, whether it's an assessor or product partner, whoever it might be, has to sit down and actually, first of all, compare prices, find providers, and then compare the quality before making that decision. So it's not just, Googling the first thing that you find, the first unit that you need and buying it. You need to make sure that it's compliant, because at the end of the day, how you use it and what the user experience is going to be is really your responsibility. So that choosing and reviewing off the shelf has time allocated to it, and that time will cost you. And then there's the matter of addressing those gaps. So you may have found a product that you're happy with, but there's still going to be some gaps, whether it's you need it to be contextualized, whether if it's off the shelf, you need to add some more either classroom resources or online resources to bring that content back and make it relatable for that particular learner or your staff member. There is still some work that you need to do. It's not like, I don't know of any product where you can just buy it, plug it in, and get the user experience that you want. There is going to be some, whether it's even minimalist to branding, there is some work you're going to have to do. And depending on how much work you're doing, there's a cost associated with that. Especially for RTOs where you're contextualizing particular units you might have bought for a particular course. So if, for example, make a presentation, it's quite a generic unit. It can go across marketing, it can go across TAE, it can go across business. But the example that you will buy will be whatever qualification the developer has developed it in. So it might be a marketing context and you need it for training and assessment context. There will be a part of that you will need to contextualize. And as soon as you contextualize the learning, you will have to contextualize the assessment. And again, the same thing happens with assessment is if you've bought off the shelf, it's usually quite broad in terms of what they offer you so that you can, or that the assessment can apply in different situations, in different courses, in different workplaces, different delivery modes. And then you have to contextualize and make sure it's suitable for your learners and your facilities and your resources. So if it's a unit as part of a course and your course is looking at a particular project all the way through, or a particular case study or a particular scenario, and let's say if we make a presentation and it's used in training and education courses, so certificate form training and assessment, you have to kind of speak to the students through that whole course. And now you've got this unit or a set of units that are speaking generically what making a presentation is about. You need to take it back to what making a presentation to learners might be about. And so there will be some resources that you have to develop. Assuming that you have that capability in-house, there's an added cost to actually bring that resource into your delivery strategy. And then there's the cost of actually renewing or using those subscriptions, and sometimes the licenses if you need to make any changes and what that might mean, and whether you can actually on-sell those licenses. So if you've got a member as your learner, so you might have different member groups as your learners, you've been now given a subscription to this particular unit, can you actually on-sell it? And if you're in a classroom situation, the same thing, can you actually on-sell it? And what that cost might be may actually be higher than what you might think.
Thanks. Those are really good examples, Ramona. I think we'll jump now into another activity. So it's quite obvious that Bespoke is better, but sometimes it's just as simple as the organisation can't actually afford it. So here's another scenario. Imagine you need 4 learning products, which are the ones on the screen, and you need them in your organisation now. So your budget allows you to do only one bespoke, and you'll have to choose off the shelf for all of the others. Which one do you choose to be the bespoke product? So if our attendees can just pop in the chat which options you would choose. I think the real point of this exercise is to just show that it is actually quite difficult to choose which one that you would prefer to uplift. But these are the decisions that we have to make in any business. How do we choose the best option to suit our budget, and also so that we get the best return on investment? So while you could choose any of these options, I think we probably choose number 4 as our bespoke, so that we can position ourselves as the expert in that particular area and make more money by selling a unique course that is a core to our business. So Ramona, what are your thoughts on this one?
So again, as I said earlier, it's really hard to kind of go right down the middle and say, I'm either going to choose off the shelf or bespoke, because they really are dependent on, one, your capability, the time that you have to spend and the budget that you have to uplift maybe a product. And sometimes the easiest way is to go off the shelf, but we'll walk through these and kind of discuss when we would be using one or the other or both. So a learning product that teaches your clients about how to use your LMS. Now, Usually a learning management system, whether you use Moodle, whether you use Canvas, Blackboard, whatever it might be, usually has its own user manuals, and they're quite specific. But the front end might look a little bit different in terms of where you put your resources, where you might put your discussion board, how to use that discussion board, when to use that discussion board, what you can and can't do as part of that course that's hosted on that LMS. So in that case, you may say, look, just use the user manual. We'll go by what that's guided. It's easier to just use something that's off the shelf rather than creating a brand new manual for our students. Or you may say, look, it's an intensive course. We can't have students playing around and trying to build digital skills while they're building specific skills to a particular industry or a course. So we'll give them this cheat sheet. And then you will need a particular bespoke video or a handout to explain where things are situated, where the assessments are, how to submit correctly, how to upload a document, how to download, and so forth. And you may want to create, in addition to that manual, something additional. So off the shelf would probably suffice if you had no time and no budget. But maybe in this case, you could do off the shelf and bespoke, where you add specific examples or instructions on how to do the course that you've got on that particular LMS without having students lost in 300 pages of all the information for that LMS. The second one is micro-learning modules teach your students about communication. Now, communication modules have been done 1,000 times over, and there's different things depending on what type, where you're looking at in terms of communication, what you might need. And it is for students, and there's a lot of units out there for communication, but it might be just something specific you want to teach your students about how to make a presentation before they actually make a presentation. It's something short, sharp. It's an additional skill outside of that particular course, or it's really developing them and getting them ready in terms of job readiness. In that case, you might want to look at bespoke, so that module specifically looks at, for example, it might be marketing, how to present a marketing plan. What are some of the tips and tricks? Maybe you've got an interview with somebody that is in that industry. Maybe you've got a scenario or an example that you can show them in terms of how this might work, so that when they are presenting, whether it's for their assessment or getting them in job ready, they've actually got a live example, assuming that you can't find that online. But as I said, with communication, there's probably modules out there that you could edit, but in terms of best solution, you'd be looking at something bespoke for that. A learning guide to staff on how to use MS Office, apply it to your organizational needs. It's very similar to number one. In the first one, we're looking at your students using a particular system, a generic system. And the third one is looking at your staff using a specific or generic tool, office tool. Again, the resources out there are probably just as good as any. They may not be as simple, and they may not be as quick and accessible as the ones that you could develop that will say these are the particular parts of that tool that we use commonly, and this is what we would be using them for, and this is how we would like you to use them. It might be, booking rooms through your calendar, which may not be in the MS Office guide. So it's really looking at specifically what that manual has and what else do I need to add. In that case, you're probably better off using both, taking the off-the-shelf product and then developing something in addition to it. And then the last one was the unit of competency, which is key to your business of activity. And this could be a workplace setting. If you're delivering as a vet provider, it might be a unit of competency that is done as part of an apprenticeship or as a traineeship or a workplace delivery, where it's really core to that business as well. It's not just part of a course, and you really want to contextualize it to that business activity or place. Then again, you could buy an off-the-shelf product and then look at creating a blended solution or a bespoke solution that will complement it, that talks specifically to what that business might need in terms of that unit of competency. So if we look at that particular example we had before about safety and construction, here we might be looking at it, safety and construction and specifically plumbing, and then giving them some examples, whether it's videos or scenarios or statistics about plumbing standards not being met and the consequences of those, and so forth, so that you're actually bringing it together for the student. So as you can see with every single one of these examples, there is an opportunity to buy off the shelf, which is your quicker, cheaper option, and then customizing it.
Thanks,
slightly.
Ramona. Yeah, great. That was a great example of how each of those scenarios could work. So do you want to just talk about a little bit about turnkey or shelf-spoke learning products?
Yeah. So at eWorks, we do have something that we call shelf spoke, or what you might refer to as turnkey, which is basically buying an off-the-shelf product that you have, or an existing product that you might already have, and you feel like it needs something more. And we could then uplift that. And that is an option that you might want to consider when you don't have the time and you don't have the budget to start from scratch, or you really like what you've had, but it's time for a bit of a change, whether you're starting to have different types of people in your workplace, or your students are kind of changing from your traditional students, and you need a little bit of scaffolding between the product and your new learners. Or it might be that the context has slightly changed, industry standards have changed, it's specific to your own workplace, and you want something to be done to it, but you've already got a base to start with, or it's almost compliant, but it's not 100% compliant. Then this is where you could start looking at a turnkey solution, where you will basically have the off the shelf, and then there's recommendations as to what you would like uplifted. And it minimizes the opportunity for, I suppose, starting from scratch and doing that analytical piece, because there's already a picture of what the end product would like to be, or how you would like it to feel. It's just a matter of us now having a discussion about the extent of change, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, and so I think there's an opportunity for people to share with us if they've got a project that they would like to get a quote for. So Ramona's going to share the link in our chat. It is also our feedback form for our webinar. So please take the time to fill that in. I'm not sure if that link worked there, Ramona.
No, it didn't. I'll just put the link back in from the actual
Yeah,
slide.
perfect. So so participants can please fill that in. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions, or let us know if you'd like to talk to us about a specific project by filling in the Tell Us More section. So we'd appreciate your feedback there. And then we'd also love to hear from people about a key takeaway from today's session in the chat. We can obviously also open the floor for questions. So we'd love to hear from you. Probably given a couple of activities at once there, Ramona. Maybe if we're while we're waiting, I might just ask you a question. So, like, what is a quality off-the-shelf product? So is that what kind of things should we be looking for if we are looking at off-the-shelf products?
So I think the first thing is, and all of these really depend on you understanding your learners or your audience, is it written in a way that it would make sense for the learner? So if it's, you've got people that are new to the industry, is the jargon that they use, is the language that they use relevant to somebody that's just coming on board to learn this particular topic or this particular unit? That would be the easiest place to start. Does it make sense? Does it flow? Also, the images that are used to kind of convey those messages. Sometimes we don't need pages and paragraphs of words. Sometimes a simple message or a diagram can really illustrate the point, and it's easier for us to digest. So starting to look at the types of images that are used and the quality of those images and diagrams. This is, like a quick review if you're just flipping through a product. Starting to look at whether, the topics and ideas are presented in such a way that it actually builds on the last, paragraph or the last topic, and that there is a build-up of complexity. It's not just a series of topics randomly placed where, the learner really has to take the time and assume that they have those learning skills to be able to scaffold that learning for themselves. So that would be probably a key thing for me is, if I'm looking at a product, is it a really good learning tool? Because what we're talking about here are basically content for learning. Does it support learning? Does it consider, the learner? Has it got strong learning design underneath pinning it? So they're probably the quick reviews. If we're looking at it for the vocational space, I would be looking at the assessments, and quickest way is going to the mapping document and looking at some of those things that have been mapped. to say, does it really map to what they say it maps to, the criteria that it's supposed to be mapped to, and is it compliant on surface? Obviously, you need to do a validation to really see whether the tool is compliant. But on surface, just having a quick look at the assessment and whether it actually assesses what it's supposed to, whether the instructions to the assessors are there. And sometimes, you know, where we find low quality tools, or what we deem low quality tools, is as soon as there's no marking guide or an assessor guide, we just deem that to be a non-compliant product. So I think on surface that those would be the quick checks. I'd be interested to see if anybody else has anything else that they review for. You might want to put that in the chat. If you're looking for a product or you're comparing products, what are some of the things that you consider as part of that quick check?
Thanks, Ramona. I've just shared that SurveyMonkey link in the chat. We haven't had any other questions come through, but obviously you're very welcome to reach out to Ramona and myself. We'd be happy to answer anything you like outside of the webinar. So I think what I'll just do now is thank everyone for your time. Our next webinar is in August on the 22nd at 2 o'clock. The topic is going to be on choosing the right LMS for your business, with insights about why and how to choose an LMS for your organisation. So Chris and Mark from our LMS team are going to be joined by Prue Meller from Age Concern and Jason Vallely from the Community Media Training Organisation. So we're really looking forward to that one. There'll be some great examples of what a couple of our clients are doing in their real life situations. So yeah, so thank you, Ramona, for your time, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you online again soon.
Bye, everyone.